Good to go.
We're live. Hi, everybody. We're here with Alexia Vernon, who we're so excited to talk with today. This is Alexia in the corner over here. We are talking today about using speaking engagements to grow your solo business, which is something that I feel really passionate about. I feel like it's an underutilized marketing strategy for a lot of solo business owners and one-woman shops. And so we have a huge expert with us, no pressure. So Alexia has been called Moxie Maven by the White House, which is kind of a big deal. And she coaches people on public speaking, and she's an executive coach as well. And so we have tons of questions for her. But Alexia, if you would like to tell us a little bit more about yourself, that would be awesome.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It always gets me really excited when people have found me online and read something like you both did and wanted to go deeper into that topic. So for those who do not know me, my background, as was mentioned, is in the world of public speaking and leadership development. With that said, I am probably the least likely person to be doing that work, given that I did not come into the world as somebody who was inherently confident or charismatic or even coherent. It really took me a long time, both to develop the mindset, but also to develop the skills to be able to speak up and out, whether it was on behalf of my business, but also just being able to do that in my relationships with friends, family, and business contacts. So the work that I do now is really geared towards empowering women and men, but primarily women, to be able to step into their moxie, is what I call it, to use public speaking to grow their tribe and to be able to put their big ideas into the world.
Perfect.
That's great. Yeah. I think it's something that so many of us one-woman shops just don't even consider, and we kind of shy away from because we're a little scared. So to dig in a little further about your personal experience as a solo business owner, do you have a typical day, or if not day, week, or month as a solo business owner, and what does it look like?
I figured you would ask me something like this, and I laugh because typical is very comical, particularly since I had a daughter. So I have a 16-month-old as of when we're recording this, which means that any sense of me being in control of my calendar, I can naively think that that's going to happen, and then all kinds of surprises emerge. With that said, there are some general themes, one would say, that the days when I have childcare support, I have the most amazing nanny who's come into my life just in the last few weeks, and I bring that up because for so long I was primarily scheduling clients in the wee hours of the morning and praying that it would be people from the East Coast who would work with me so that I could do them before my daughter woke up for the day, and then I would do the work on my business whenever she would nap during the day. But that was not the best strategy for being able to, A, work with the people that I want to work with when I want to be able to work with them, because it was really pigeonholing me. So these days I'm very clear both with my part-time team as well as with my clients that I coach certain days of the week. I try to use those early mornings now when I wake up to work on my business and do some of my writing. Then I usually coach around the hours of 10 to 3. It just depends a little bit on the day. Then after that, I usually work for a couple more hours on long-term projects. Then I'm off in the world with my kid, whether we're going to the park or going to the supermarket or just being silly in the house. Then the days when I'm not working, I'm really trying hard not to work. I would be completely lying if I said that I was 100% consistent in that. Yesterday is a perfect example. It was Mother's Day, and nonetheless I was on my computer for 4 hours. Because sometimes if I'm in the middle of big projects, I love my work too much to not be 100% in it when I need to be, if that makes sense.
We're smiling because we can relate.
You can?
Not to the motherhood part yet, but to the other part.
Yes. Yeah.
Happy Mother's Day, and it ties in really well because we just did a piece on the site about secrets of being both a mom and an entrepreneur, and so it's you know, we both have that one. We'll send it to you. We'll send you the link.
Thank you.
Although it sounds like you're figuring it out quick, but it's always, I don't think there is such a thing as a typical day in the first place, but like you said, once you add kids into the mix, that's why we were so interested to talk to moms, because it just throws everything even more for a loop.
Yes, and the one thing that I've said is that Since I've had my daughter, it's actually been that has been the most successful period of my business, and I bring that up not to make anyone feel shameful if that's not been the case, but hopefully to help people who, like me, in the initial postpartum period thought, oh my God, I'm going to have to really compromise my dreams to be the kind of mom that I want to be. And I totally support people who want to dial it down a little bit because these initial years go by so fast. But for me, for some reason, my creative juices scaled when I produced this being, which in some ways is probably the greatest creative act I'll ever be a part of. So figuring it out together has been tricky, but I really 100% believe that it can be done without feeling like you're not the kind of business owner you want to be, or you're not the kind of mom that you want to be.
That's awesome.
That's a really cool perspective.
Thanks.
And can you tell us a little, just jumping back a little bit more to your background, I know you said you didn't always feel charismatic and you didn't always feel confident, and I know you have a little bit of a pageant history, is that right?
Yes, one pageant.
One pageant. What was that?
I said it's only one pageant, but it was significant because I won, and I was very clear, and this might be what you're alluding to, that for me winning was not about being the prettiest girl. By far was not, and I'm not saying that so that people will say, oh, Alexia, you're pretty. Like, legitimately, that was not the case, but we had to do a lot of speaking. And for some reason, all of the coherent speaking gods showed up to support me through that process, and it was the first time I can remember just really connecting to an audience and not getting in my head thinking, I want them to like me. Instead, it was about, because we had to do so much talking about our platform, and mine was being able to raise awareness about sexual violence on college campuses, being able to connect with the audience and translate my passion for that topic. And the big takeaway from that was, when you connect first and foremost to your audience and you want to just love up on them with your ideas, that's when suddenly you are your most confident, you're most clear, but you're also much more likely to call them to take action, whether that's action for your business or for your social cause or for anything else. So that was a huge turning point for me.
That's really
Yeah, that's a good story.
Yeah. So speaking of speaking, let's jump right in. One of our biggest questions for you is talking about the benefits that speaking holds for solo business owners. So kind of second part of that question is, do you think that every business owner can benefit from pursuing speaking engagements?
I do. Any person who has the desire to do that, and that's important because you don't, I believe, have to come in talented, but you do have to want to be able to do it effectively. Occasionally, I've had people come to me who feel like they have to speak, and unfortunately, like anything, when you're doing it by force because you feel like you have to, then it never works out very well. But the reason I feel like if there is the desire, forget about the how for a minute, why it's so effective is because when you are looking into the eyes of an audience, I mean, I love podcasts, I love reading people's blogs, but there's something really powerful when you, as a business owner, allow people to see you and when you really see the people you're speaking with. And it's as close to a God-like experience as I can describe because it just feels like all of the pretense, all of the trying to people-please stuff falls away, and what you're left with is just you as a speaker, business owner, sharing what you know can uniquely benefit an audience. And so I find that even if I have an audience of 10, I'm much more likely to convert 8 out of those 10 people than if I do something large and I have 100 people, let's say, just listening to an audio or a bunch of people reading a newsletter in a given week. Just the way that I am able to connect with people and the way that anyone who's speaking is able to connect with people. It's just different and better.
Mm-hmm. It reminds me of a post that we just put up on the site, which is that business isn't one size fits all, and so that's something that we feel very strongly about, that there's not one marketing solution, and that it's important to be open to the different ideas that are out there, which is kind of why we wanted to talk with you. We want people to be open to the idea of speaking, but I really like that you pointed out if you have no interest, it might not be something to pursue. So
right. The beautiful thing about marketing is there are no shortage of strategies, so you have to find what makes sense for you. At the same time, if it's the one that scares you the most, it may be that it's your greatest opportunity, because I say often that when you feel a lot of sensation in your body If that sensation is pulling you forward, it probably means you're on the cusp of doing something big. And to, as Sheryl Sandberg would say, lean into it and be present with it and don't try to shove it down. If you find yourself closing off a lot or leaning back, then that might be an indicator that for whatever reason it's not right for you, and that's your intuition saying pause and check yourself. This isn't quite right.
Yeah, I love that. I think I can see Christina's wheels turning. We're going to be definitely sharing some of these little quotes in the show notes here because your perspective is fantastic. So moving on, for the people that it is a really fantastic opportunity and maybe they do have the desire, what do you think holds most people back? What are the obstacles that you see most often, and how do you help people overcome them?
There's a few key ones. With that said, of course, everyone's different, but number one is always mindset. A lot of people feel like if I've had a negative experience in the past, or if it does bring up a lot of sensation, that they're probably labeling fear or nervousness. I'm never going to be able to get to the other side of this, so why bother when there's other things I can do that feel less high stakes? Mm-hmm. The second one would probably be, where do I start? There's been so much shifting and evolution in speaking, particularly for entrepreneurs. And a lot of folks have had a bad taste in their mouth because they either feel like they have to pay gobs of money to get on a stage, which certainly that is one vehicle, but it's not the only vehicle. And or people feel like I pitch myself to speak for free and then they don't ever see business come out of it, and that's usually because they're not understanding how to be able to use a free opportunity to be able to leverage more business. They feel like, well, if I'm going to do that, then I'm going to have to be salesy, and that's not who I am, particularly for women. So all of that stuff comes into play where I think a lot of people then feel, well, maybe I should just launch something. Wouldn't that be easier? When in fact, doing a high-quality webinar or even doing a podcast or certainly getting in front of a live audience, not only can it be, quote, easier than having to do a bunch of stuff online, but it also can let you be more you if you use it as an invitation for that purpose, rather than trying to fit into a model of what you think a speaker should be.
Yeah, no, that's great.
My mind just went in 10 different follow-up directions, so we'll just choose one. But you mentioned, well, I'm sure we'll get to all of them eventually, but you mentioned that obviously one of the biggest obstacles is starting or not knowing where to start. Can you talk a little bit about how you started, how other people that you coach have started, just kind of first action steps, I guess?
Sure. I definitely started by default rather than by design. So after Miss Junior America, I then started to get asked to speak at a lot of schools, Boys and Girls Clubs, Girl Scouts, and for a lot of those gigs I was not getting paid. It was just part of the deal for winning. And in many ways, I'm very grateful that I had those experiences because it just kept me doing it. And like anything, if you want to be good at something, buff up those muscles, and you buff them up through practice. Mm-hmm. Then I had a period of time, because I was in college, where I went to grad school, and I wasn't speaking in the traditional sense, but I started leading a lot of workshops. And after I graduated, that wound up becoming my hustle. Full-time was leading workshops for teachers and doing teacher training stuff. And then I wound up teaching public speaking at a university. So professionally, it was what I was doing in one way or another before I left to start my own consulting company. But I don't find that that's the traditional trajectory. For a lot of people, they might have one or two opportunities that just show up as their business becomes slightly more high profile, particularly if they have a client base that's in their community. So they might get asked to speak to a Rotary Club or a chapter of, let's say, the National Association of Women Business Owners or eWomen Network or something like that. And oftentimes, sadly, those opportunities get messed up a little bit because somebody uses them and they speaks, but they're not using the same framework they would use. Let's say if they were writing a guest post or if they were writing email marketing, they're not looking at it in that capacity. They're just looking at it to teach. When, even if I'm doing a transformational workshop, which is one of my favorite things to be able to do as a speaker, I'm always really clear, how is the speaking opportunity parlaying into my larger business and more specifically my revenue goals, and I'm reverse engineering from where I want to be, and then making sure that everything I do in that speech, while full of stories, while full of transformation for that audience, is still leading them towards where I want them to go, whether that's a retreat that I have coming up that I want to plant the seed for, or it's a 6-month mentorship program that I'm doing. So for people who are thinking, okay, that sounds familiar, I may have had some of those initial public speaking opportunities, and I'm seeing that at the end I said, thank you very much, or here's my Twitter handle, or sign up for my newsletter, that maybe that's why nothing happened. What I can tell you is that those can be really great places to start locally, even if you don't have a huge client base, to get comfortable, to grow your list, and to hopefully start having an offer that feels appropriate for that audience. But for people, let's say, who don't really have any connections, or for whatever reason don't want to start in their community, doing webinars is a wonderful way, and webinars in many ways are even easier to monetize than a live speaking gig for, let's say, a local chapter of an organization, to get comfortable, to not hide behind a slide deck. So if anyone's ever done a webinar with me, you know that rarely do I use slides, and even if I do use slides, it's for certain strategic pieces where I think people really need to see the info, but the rest of the time, it's my shiny face, because that's what's enabling people to really connect with you. So a webinar can be as simple as, picking up lead pages or whatever online technology you want, having a good Facebook ad to send to a landing page, and then you're in business and you're speaking. And even when I have clients who are doing retreats or larger speaking events, I'll often recommend that they do a webinar as a free mini version of that larger offering, because it's easy to run a Facebook ad and to have an audience show up for that webinar, so that you're then filling your live event with the right high quality leads.
Love all that.
Yeah. So following up to that, when people identify kind of where they want to get started, do you have any tips for how, just out of the blue, they can pitch a local chapter of an organization, or even an online counterpart to host a webinar? How do you suggest people get started in that vein?
So I'm always inspired by what people in my space, what they're doing. I don't look at it as competition. I always say to myself, if X, Y, and Z person is doing this, then I better join the party and do it as well. So as a starting place, look at what people who are close to you are doing. Many have in their newsletters or on their websites where they're speaking, what webinars they're doing. It's not to be a carbon copy of that person, but just to spark ideas. So for example, if you see that there's a few key telesummits that people in your space have been doing, then reach out to that person. Make sure you participate in that telesummit, get a sense of how you can add value, how you can be complementary without being redundant. And much like you would pitch a guest post or anything else, keep it short, 2 to 3 simple paragraphs. I don't want to teach the whole element of a pitch right now, because I feel like that's sort of weird to do when you're speaking rather than when you're able to see it. But at its most basic, in that first line, you want to make clear that you understand the format of that person's chapter, if it's a live event, or that person's podcast, or whatever it is. Then very briefly, this is not the place to put in your full bio, share with them what you believe that you can provide value on that hasn't been discussed, and that's why it's important to know what they've done. Because, for example, if I know that my local chapter of any professional association, let's say National Association of Realtors, if I'm interested in getting realtors to speak, if they just had a public speaking consultant come in, A, it looks like I don't really know the group, and B, they're not going to be interested. So I do survey what have the most recent speakers spoken about. So let's say that they did have someone who did something on public speaking and overcoming your fear. It doesn't mean that I can't still pitch that organization, but maybe I'll come in with how to lead your own educational workshop, or how to be able to use storytelling. So some speaking stuff will come in, but other stuff around storytelling and persuasion will, so that I'm always positioning myself honestly, but looking for the gaps, because it's in those gaps where people are most likely going to be interested in you. Because if they've liked that topic before, that's a good sign. You don't want an organization, let's say, or an entrepreneur who's never, ever, ever even tiptoed into your area, because it probably means that they're not interested. Again, it's just that strategic positioning.
Love that. So many quotables, so many tweetables in there. Yeah, I think I think what you basically said is there's a way to pitch yourself in so many different aspects of business, and there might be slight variations, but generally I think one obstacle we see is people being really intimidated by this idea of speaking, whereas they're so comfortable with guest post pitching. And I think what you're seeing is there's very, very common threads between those different kinds of pitching.
Especially in online, it's literally the exact same format, only instead of describing what the post would be, you're going to describe your talk. So you have to have that same level of clarity where you're not. I think the key difference is that if you're doing it from speaking, a blog might be the 3 top strategies to XYZ versus when you're speaking, it's not quite the same angle. I recommend looking a lot at TED-style talks, whether it's TEDx events or even just other events that use that format. So there is more of that element of inspirational and standing behind an idea that hasn't been articulated before. So rarely do I say, I'm going to speak about how to find your confidence as a public speaker. But I might say how to find your secret sauce as a speaker. So that, again, it's got something branded that's true to me. It's not a gimmick. But it enables me not to sound like this is a post that everyone has read before.
Okay.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I know on your website you talk a lot about the power of storytelling and bringing your story into it, and that's also so important. And I think we all try to be so educational that we forget that we can kind of infuse it with ourselves as well.
Yeah, and then in a post, people are, for whatever reason, expecting to get a lot of content. But when people are speaking live, most would much rather have 2 or 3 really juicy, actionable things to take away, but also have had a ton of opportunity to connect with someone through their story by hearing where they've struggled and how they've shifted that into a success, much more so than 30 different things, none of which they're going to remember or be able to take action on.
Absolutely.
Right, that's a good point. Flipping back real quick to the idea of speaking for exposure versus speaking for pay, do you have any, Alexia Vernon, rules on when to decide which to go with?
I do. The basic rule is, how is this serving my larger business goals? So if I have a business goal, let's say, and I did a couple of years ago, where I really wanted to focus much more concretely in corporate training. So I took a lot of, quote, free, and actually in some cases paid my way to go to those conferences, gigs, so that I could be in front of HR leaders or learning development professionals or C-suite officers, because I knew those were the decision makers who were going to decide, will they bring Alexia in to lead a training, or will they bring me in to deliver a keynote? So for me, that was definitely a choice. Now with that said, I wasn't going to speak in my local community at that particular time for free on a topic that didn't have an audience that were those business level decision makers, because that wasn't going to be useful. Now ironically, since I've had my little one and I'm not as excited to get on an airplane unless it really is a juicy gig and in front of an audience of people who just totally get me, I'm doing a lot more locally, sometimes not for pay, if I can make an offer for that audience, because I'm doing, let's say, a big transformational weekend. So that, quote, free gig, if I have 2 people that, let's say, decide to do an offering that's $2,500, suddenly for staying in my own community, it's actually a $5,000 speaking gig. But I won't do those unless I have an offer. So I recommend that people ask themselves those questions. If they're just starting out, it may be completely appropriate to say, my business goal is to overcome my fear of public speaking so that I can do more of it to be able to build my business, in which case, go anywhere and everywhere for a little while. And then progressively get clear, I'm trying to reach entrepreneurs, so I'm only doing speaking gigs where there's entrepreneurs in the audience. Or this is the year where I just want to grow my list, so I'm not even making offers, with the exception of, let's say I have a slide and it's giving people an address that they text to get some cool free download, making it really simple so that they're growing their list every time they speak.
Yeah, so that's a really good point. And I know that everybody's call to action or what they want to get out of it will be different, but how do you recommend kind of capitalizing on that opportunity, whether it's to gain clients or customers or get signups? Basically, for the people that are feeling like they don't want to add a sales pitch, how can they work that into the opportunity?
The simplest way, much like if you were doing a free guest post, is to have some kind of free goodie that people can opt in and get. I don't think, with the exception of a TEDx audience where there's absolutely no promotion, there are very few audiences that won't allow you to give something away, particularly if it's not live at the event, but it is an email capture. So that can be just shown on the website. Maybe you create something special for the event. It's, let's say if I was doing it for today, alexiavernon.com/one-woman-shop, something that's simple, where people can go in, and then I might do a whole campaign just for those people who have opted in that particular day, where I'm going to send them 3 or 4 emails to go deeper into that topic, and maybe at the end then is an invitation to some program that I'm doing.
Yeah.
I want to just underscore again, I know that I said this a little bit earlier, that the people you get to opt in from a speaking gig are going to be crazy, crazy, crazy fans of yours in a way that if somebody just opts in from a Facebook ad or because they checked out your website, it's a different level of connection because those people have spent 20, 30, 45 minutes, 60 minutes with you. They've heard your story. And so, while it may seem like, well, I'm only getting 10 or 15 people, when I look at the events that I've done over the last few years, who they were, I can't tell, I don't know the exact percentage off the top of my head, but at my last Master Retreat, someone had heard me speak, gosh, 5 years ago at my book launch, and she said, I've just been waiting for you to do this event in Las Vegas, and I hadn't done one quite like it. But it's that level of, you don't need as many people because those are the people who are going to go along on the ride with you. That's my little one in the background.
She agrees. Or he.
She's already speaking her mind.
We like girls like that. I think you made a really good point. The last people that we had on the hangout were 2 sisters who run an event planning business, and so we talked to them a lot about what events can do for your solo business. And so I think the thread here, I like making connections, and I like to use the word thread, obviously. But the common thread is, we do so much online, and obviously we are all about digital marketing and working online, but that there is a lot of potential for in-person to connect on a different level, as you said.
And I consider what we're doing a form of speaking, to be sure. So online can still mean your voice, your picture, but not geographically specific. So that you can be broadcasting to a larger audience.
That's a good clarification.
Yeah, and I think even when we do host member hangouts for One Woman Shop, we always stress the fact that it's so nice to get people on camera because it's different than phoning it in, and you can't put the name to the face and the face to the voice, and so it's a total, like you said, a totally different level of connection.
Awesome. So, just looking over what we got. We've got so many questions. Can you just talk a little bit about ways that you can revamp your speaking content into other content?
For sure. This one took me a really long time to figure out, and I'm guessing it's because I was doing a lot of keynotes for a while, where you're being paid a set fee. You go in, you deliver your material, you are not asking people to join your list. You're done, people say sayonara, and that's the end of it. So I was always developing speaking content to get a good keynote and to provide value in that context, usually for a more business audience. So when I started to really focus on teaching other people the art and practice of speaking and leading events and so forth, far too often I would create speaking content again and again and again for a specific audience rather than taking that core talk and making little pivots within the talk to make it relevant to that audience, but linking it really concretely to whatever my goal was for that audience. Because let's say, in a perfect example, is I did a lot of speaking around the launch of your Spotlight Talk, which is a training program for people to develop their own TED-style talks and to get booked to speak on TEDx stages. And a lot of the talks that I would give in front of live audiences that time, what I was actually offering was enrollment in my Master Retreat weekend. But I was making sure that for people, let's say, who didn't want to make that upper level commitment, that then your spotlight talk was a much more in-depth version of what I was talking about during that talk, which was storytelling or how to be vulnerable or whatever it was. So in general, you want that live talk you do to pull out 2 or 3 themes of whatever your fuller program is, but then that fuller program really has got to begin where your live talk left off, so that people feel like they're just naturally moving from one idea to the next, rather than, I talked about negotiation for an hour in front of this audience, but now my program is pitching. They're close, but there's a disconnect, and it's in that disconnect that people don't follow through because they don't see why this next thing you're offering is super necessary.
That's a really, really great point. So I think you touched, just in that alone, you touched on a couple things, but what are some of the more common mistakes that you see people make when they're just getting started?
And I recognize I'm repeating some things, but if you're anything like me and you're listening, it's sometimes good to hear the important stuff a few times.
Sure.
So one, speaking without being really clear on their goals and how this is fitting in with their business. I'm saying that again. A second one is not structuring their talk or their keynote or whatever, or their workshop, whatever you want to call it, in such a way that their audience is in mind, their learning experience. So there's been more and more discussion about this in how to create really effective e-courses, and actually one of my good friends, Dr. Kelly Edmonds, talks quite a bit about this from the e-course format, that we just think that if we have lots of content expertise, that people are going to be wild about us and learn when we share information, but we actually have to understand a little bit about adult learning in terms of how to meet people where they are to effectively take them to where they need to be. Some of that is helping people get very clear on what their resistance is, showing them what the payoff is for making some subtle but significant changes, helping them be able to troubleshoot some of the areas that they might get stuck. All of that has to go in whether you're trying to change people's behavior in a course or change it through the course of your talk. So I see that as a mistake people make online, and then they also unfortunately make it live. Not asking the right questions at the end to either enroll people in a program or even just to get them on a list is a mistake. But then the other one is follow-up. If you just want to get people on a list, I do that plenty, but then you want to follow up with those people specifically about the content of what your talk was on, because I can't assume since somebody came to see me talk about public speaking that they necessarily want to do my women's leadership program. Hopefully they do, but that's too different. They need the public speaking follow-up, not my general follow-up that I would just do to my newsletter list. And probably the other big one that I'll mention so no one gets in information overload is I find that a lot of people, in a way that we don't necessarily do it with our online stuff, get super territorial and competitive, particularly with other women. So if this particular event I've wanted to speak at and somebody in my space is speaking at it, then I could never pitch myself there because clearly they've already got their talking about e-learning. So they've already got their e-learning person. Rather than thinking, oh, if that person spoke there, then that means it's possible for me to speak there too. And to respond to that in 2 ways. One, let me actually reach out and build a relationship with that person and make her a colleague rather than a competitor. I think Misha Moodley and Sarah Jenks are 2 really good examples of people who've done that really well. They're both sort of in the women's body image, lifestyle space. They do events together. They have their own training programs, but they do not compete. That's really inspiring to me to watch that unfold online. I don't know them both personally. And then the second is, because at the end of the day, the event organizer does make the decision. Of course, build relationships with people in your space because you can refer each other, you can do joint ventures together, particularly I'm thinking retreats or workshops. But also make sure that you're reaching out to the people who organize events. Try to get them on the phone. Interview them for your blog. Make sure you know them before a speaking submission is due so that you've got that personal relationship in place.
I love this. This is a fantastic primer for people just starting out. It's great. But it makes me really curious to learn what is and you can name more than one thing, but what is the coolest thing you've seen happen with one of your clients, particularly somebody that was tentative about starting out?
The story is so close, and I want to be very respectful to not reveal details that would define her, but I'll give you just broad strokes. This was somebody who came to me via a Facebook ad, who I think either found my webinar or found my free training, enrolled in a program of mine, decided very quickly that she wanted to move into the more intensive one, and when she showed up was very clear that this was terrifying for her, that she had a lisp, that she, without getting too specific, had some very intense physiological responses that were going on. And when we had our first one-on-one session, she was probably one of the first people who I just wanted to give her a huge hug off the get-go, but really thought to myself, I don't know if I can help. Like, there's so much going on here that's deeper than mindset, that's true behavior, and I'm not a speech pathologist. I don't know. I just don't know. I mean, and so I was very honest about that. And within a matter of weeks, to see her level of evolution, to see all of that stuff fade away, her confidence, her clarity, and ultimately getting booked to speak at TEDx, on a TEDx stage within literally less than a month of maybe 6 weeks of us having been together. That is one that just touched my heart. Then there's other people who I consider for sure a success story. They might have huge followings, be making, in this particular person's case, 7 figures, have a best-selling book, get speaking gigs all of the time, but know that they're not really being them in those speaking gigs. They're always being that expert that other people want them to be. So seeing them be able to unhook from some of that and speak with their audience rather than at an audience, that also makes me really, really happy, because if they've got a platform to just know that now they're not just somebody who's drawing a bunch of people to an event, that because there's a bunch of people at that event, that now they're sparking transformation in all of those people, like, what an awesome opportunity as a leader, as a change agent.
That's really nice.
Yeah, those are great stories. I would love to hear more about overcoming the physiological stuff, but I'm sure that's something that it must have been really cool just to see how your program could take somebody through those levels and get them there. So
yeah, and I think it's kind of in a way it's nice to hear that, you know, even you feel kind of intimidated sometimes in your business, and you feel you know, scared, or, you know, you feel like you might not be able to have an effect. So it's, we can relate.
I want to talk about one area where that comes up for me a lot, because I think that this is probably not just me. But if you're really good at what you do, it's likely that you are going to attract people in other fields, they're not in your field, who have trappings of success, let's say, that are higher than yours at a certain point. But they're coming to you because what they see in you is your specific gift, and how that gift is something that they want, and not going into that why are they choosing me stuff that we can all do really well, and doing the right work to slow down and to breathe and to recognize that if they're seeing that in us, then that's our potential, and we have a responsibility to capitalize on it. Because I've had a few of those experiences lately where I've thought, oh, I sort of worship this person who showed up, and then I have to check myself, because it's like I could totally sabotage that opportunity if I don't recognize, you know, yes, I may not be making 7 figures in my business yet, but that doesn't mean that I'm not darn good at what I do, and I want to stand in my power and in my expertise in that way.
Yeah, that's really great advice, and something that we all need to keep in mind.
Cool. We are close to wrapping up, but we like to always finish off with a few rapid-fire questions, which we always say we're not very good at rapid-fire because we like to, like we said, ask follow-up. We'll try to keep it rapid-fire. So, tell us your favorite social media platform.
Instagram.
Cool. Why?
Awesome.
Am I allowed to say why?
Yeah, no, you're allowed to say as much as you want. We're the ones who are trying to keep quiet.
Okay. I'm not the biggest person on Instagram. People do all of these fancy things. I'm a very visual person, and I don't have a lot of normal artistic skills, but I love the idea of being able to capture something that is inspirational to me at that moment. There's a ton of kid pics, not going to lie, because it's often my daughter, and being able to share that, that makes me really excited, and it doesn't feel as overcrowded as Facebook does, even though I'm on Facebook every single day.
Yeah, so on the flip side of that, which social media platform could you just kind of care less about?
It's Slack, and I feel awful for saying that because my team, they're all on Slack working on my stuff, communicating. For whatever reason, and I don't really know what it is, it just makes me feel like I'm about to get a migraine. Like I can't handle it. So that would be the one. Sorry, Slack folks, that just doesn't resonate for me.
Gotcha.
Okay, let's see. The best thing I've ever heard someone say about my business is?
It happened this weekend, and it was from somebody who I really look up to. And she said at the end of a live experience that I was facilitating in front of the group, I don't want to butcher what she said. It was so nice. You are somebody who is so truly gifted, and it must be amazing for you to get to do the work you know you were put on this earth to do. And that just made me well up because it's copy that I've literally used for other people in terms of saying if you know you have that ability, you have a responsibility to share it in a big way. Like to have someone say that to me was the ultimate level of affirmation that this is what I'm supposed to be doing, and what a gift it is that I get to do it.
Yeah, I obviously haven't worked with you, but your passion really comes through. So that's, I mean, I can totally see somebody feeling that way about your work. That's great.
Thank you. We second and third it.
So I know that you have a 16-month-old daughter, so this question probably changes. But what is
Can't wait for what it is now.
What is your favorite way to unwind after a long day running your business?
Yes. You know, it's funny. The only thing that's changed is that she's now a part of it. So it used to be that my husband and I would take a walk together, just around our neighborhood, not fast, not athletic, but it would just be us getting out of our house and talking to each other. And now we try to do that as often as we can, especially when the weather is nice, which it is quite often in Las Vegas, where my home base is, to just walk, and we'll walk her in the stroller. But there's something about the physical movement, which I'm a huge proponent of for entrepreneurs, because it's way too easy for us to get stuck behind a computer screen. To get up, to walk, and to talk, those are all the best things put together, throwing in nature.
Awesome.
That's really neat. And we always like to close out with this question, which is, what is the best part of being an entrepreneur?
It's the ability to write whatever rules you want to play by, and to know that if at any point you're writing an instruction manual for yourself that you don't like anymore, that you get to close it up and start writing again. Like, what a gift that we can do that.
I love it.
I'm trying not to tear up. That was so beautiful. I love that.
Well, Alexia, we always like to give you the option, if you want, to share with us what you're currently working on, which I'm sure you have something really cool going on in your business. But tell us a little bit about that, and then tell us how our members can find you or how they can connect with you.
Sure. I'm not sure when this is going to air, so I'll protect myself as much as possible. The best way to always get in touch with me is via alexiavernon.com. That's my primary website, and hopefully my new site will be up. That should be happening in the next week or two, because I'm very jazzed about it. My existing site has needed a refresh for a long time, and I've been so passionate about putting out projects that I've never kind of gone back to home base to renovate it. But then the next big project, in addition to that website, which again, just putting the finishing touches on, is called Your Spotlight Workshop, and it will be coming this summer, and it's a group coaching program for entrepreneurs and other thought leaders who know that they want to take what they're good at and create an epic, game-changing live workshop with that material for their community. And it doesn't mean that they have to do a large event. The focus is actually, how do you do really high-quality events for 10, 20, 30 people that pay you big bucks and change lives. So for folks who want info on that, yourspotlightworkshop.com is where they can go.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll definitely, when we post this, we'll add all of this stuff to the show notes for sure.
Cool.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I know that we both have walked away with some pretty cool, actionable advice, and definitely feel inspired. And so we're excited to share it with our members. So thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. You both are fantastic, and I love what you're doing.
Thank you so much. It was good to meet you too.